2 minutes past the hour, and it's time to get things kicked off. If you are in the call today, you are joining us for Demystifying Generative AI. My name is Carly Akerley. I'm a communications manager at the Linux Foundation. The wonderful Jeremiah Long, contributing member of the LFAI and Data Gen AI Commons Education and Outreach Committee, will be presenting everything Gen AI today. You'll be learning about Generative AI Commons, and you're also going to get some real life examples of how to use Gen AI in your work and personal life. There'll be several opportunities for you to ask questions throughout the presentation, and also a Q&A session at the end. And with that, I will turn things over to Jeremiah, and I'll be in the background helping facilitate with questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Carly, so much for that introduction, and thank you so much to Jen for also helping set up everything and get all of our marketing in order so that we can get the messaging out. And thank you so much to the Linux Foundation Generative AI Commons Education and Outreach Committee for giving me this opportunity to speak to you from a specific place. Now, we love open source. We love the technical aspects of generative AI, but this one is for everyone who's just starting their journey or is trying to figure out how that journey can relate to an interdisciplinary study between computer science, the humanities, business, all those aspects that go outside of the computer. So I am Jeremiah Long, and I'm going to go ahead and share and show you some of the information we're starting off with here right now with my desktop. Okay. All right. Are we full screen? Okay, cool. So you are again in Generative AI Commons Demystifying Generative AI webinar. We're going to talk about what it is and how you can use it. Today is April 17th, and here on the East Coast, it's just after 1 p.m. So I'm going to start off and just talk a little bit more about who I am. I am Jeremiah Long. I'm the executive director of Wedge, which is a nonprofit based here in Atlanta that helps get underrepresented people, especially into emerging technology like generative AI. I also am the founder of a software development company called Immutable Access. And Immutable Access is using research-based methods to build the tools that help create that next generation of emerging technology software to help out those exact people that we're looking to help. A lot of the work that I do as executive director relates to working with K-12 and higher learning. So we're doing research with Atlanta Public Schools, like shout out Carver, shout out Maynard Jackson, shout out Drew Charter, shout out M. Agnes Jones, Fulton County, and all of our higher ed partners like Georgia Tech and Emory University and Georgia State University, Clark Atlanta, Morehouse. The list goes on of some of the incredible institutions that are asking those questions of what is generative AI, how can it be used, and how can it be ethically incorporated into the systems we already have. Because if you are not a starter at generative AI or you've been in the computer science industry for a long time, you know there is a sea change coming as related to advanced artificial technology, artificial intelligence technology, but also emerging technologies in general. There is a lot of things going on. And so it's something that schools and people in the community are especially thinking about should I know what's going on? Can I avoid AI in general? Or should I have a strategy, whether it's to implement it or to understand what its limitations are, including data bias and data justice topics to be discussed? So that's a lot of the work that I do and a lot of the work that I circle around. I'm a multidisciplinary futurist. I'm an artist. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been working with code for almost over 2 decades now, if I'm honest. I graduated from ITT Technical Institute, getting my degree in computer network systems technology in 2002, and I was off to the races working in media technology for the next couple of decades. More recently, as I joined the Linux Foundation's Generative AI Commons Education and Outreach Committee, I realized that there was a really strong group of people who were working in not only open source, but just in the information tech world to make sure to get these messages out. And I'm incredibly thankful to the entire team, including Ofer, who's one of the people who got me into the Linux Foundation Generative AI Commons, for all of their work. And if you want to follow up with me after this event, I'll put a QR code towards the end, but you can also find me on LinkedIn at my name, Jeremiah Long. So what will we cover today? We're going to talk a little bit very lightly about what is generative AI. I promise not to make this jargon filled. We won't say a bunch of the keywords that I've been instructed not to say about generative AI, including LLM, NLP. So I won't say those words. We will keep this surfacey and we will keep this a lot about consumer-led technologies. Now, if you're ready to really dive in on a lot of those other keywords and jargon, I'm not supposed to use like foundational models, then stay with us. And at the end, I'll also show a QR code that'll allow you to engage further with the Linux Foundation's Generative AI Commons, and we can get wonky. We can go in as far as you want to go. We could talk about the model openness framework and a lot of the ways that the people in the Linux Foundation are trying their best to make sure that there's an ethical future for these products. So we'll talk about generative AI, we'll talk about generative AI use cases, and in this particular case, we're going to make our own boba tea shop. We're going to use three different parts of generative AI, which includes LLMs for text-based input with inference models. We're going to use Google Gemini, and we're going to generate a slide deck to go along with the business. And we're going to use Adobe Firefly to create some visual assets to go along with that business. Now, at the end of that, there's going to be an AMA and a Q&A, AMA meaning ask me anything, and then a Q&A meaning any other questions that you have. Feel free to throw those into the chat, to send a message to Carly, or if your questions are specifically about the boba tea shop examples as we go through, feel free to just raise your hand or throw that in there, and we'll stop the presentation during those moments and talk about the boba tea shop. But if your questions are more generally about generative AI, then we'll hold those towards the end, and I'll make sure to give plenty of time to talk about that. And of course, lastly, I'll show you some ways that you can follow up with the LF and learn more about what we're doing. And I'll also give you a page full of resources that will allow you to continue your own journey on into the Linux Foundation, but also into generative AI. So let's rock, okay? What is the AI Commons? So our mission, and I'm just going to read this because it's very specific to what we do. The Linux Foundation's Generative AI Commons is a group dedicated to fostering the democratization, advancement, and adoption of efficient, secure, reliable, and ethical generative AI open source innovations through neutral governance, open and transparent collaboration, and education. Translation, we work with the people to make sure that we all have a place in generative AI. So we have over 200 active members. There's over 80 organizations that are actively a part of Generative AI Commons, and it runs the gambit on the types of work that they do, whether it is someone who has been working on generative AI for 20, 30, 40 years, whether it's someone who is a freshman in college over at Georgia Tech. No matter who you are, there's a place for you to join us and find a work stream that you really gravitate towards and just get some work done. It's a volunteer organization. We all come together for our love of the future, our love of science, and our love of this interdisciplinary idea of taking the non-computer science side in academia and nonprofits and industry and combining that along with all of our incredible computer science experts. We embrace the responsibility of trustworthy AI, foster collaboration, and improve AI literacy through advocacy. So this is an organization I really love being a part of, and one that, towards the end here, I would love to give you more information about them. But let's get into it. What is generative artificial intelligence, or Gen AI? I'm going to read the technical definition that is actually in our Generative AI Commons glossary, but then I'm going to translate what that really means. So on the technical side, generative AI is a subset of AI focused on generating new content, especially text, images, audio, and video, by learning from existing data. To generalize, AI models create new content, introducing statistical noise based on patterns observed during during model training. This noise is applied to the latent space, allowing the model to produce output that is new, but is mostly relevant. And it should also be noted that the new content is not always relevant or accurate because it can be based off it can be based off of inferences, which we also call hallucinations. So what does all that mean? There was a lot of jargon in there, and I promised I would not stay on jargon, right? That's why I put a picture of a happy cat in the upper right corner there. That image was generated with my own generative AI art app called AI4Kids.app. That's what we're here to talk about, is what the end results are. Generative AI is really taking a large set of data and producing new data. So you take a large set of images and you produce new images. You take a large set of text and you create a map of all that text, and you can create new responses to that text. Um, Products like OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google Gemini, Midjourney for art, Adobe Firefly for art and video, Microsoft Copilot for business are all powered by generative AI. So I'm just going to hold for just a quick second and let you think about that for just a moment. So now that you're thinking about it, what is generative AI? It's basically taking a lot of data, looking at that data, reinforcing the answers to the data when you are trying to determine, what it means, and then being able to query that data and produce either new and novel results or accurate results based on the data you have. That's basically what Gen AI is. I'm gonna make sure that I'm looking here. Let's take a quick question. Okay. So let's talk about careers in generative AI. Why is this important now? Why should we be focused on it? Why should we be touching on it now? This is a graphic that I've shared with middle schoolers and high schoolers across Atlanta and across several of the different conferences that I've spoken at. According to my data, which is pulled from a 2023 report called Harnessing the Power of AI, the Demand for Future Skills, 133 million AI related jobs will be created by 2027. When I say created, these are most often jobs that do not even exist yet. Not necessarily a translation of a current job, but a job that has skills inside of it that may not even be fully realized yet. So some of those skills are with writers and directors, with editors, artists and animators, video content producers, music producers, data prompt engineers, marketing coordinators and copywriters, robotics engineers, and graphic designers. And the reason that I highlight these particular careers is because these are creative careers. While a lot of the use cases for generative AI circle around business use cases, they circle around developing methods for determining what's happening in very large data sets. They have to do with banking, they have to do with administration. Those are interesting, but for me as an artist, I'm thinking about what is an 8-year-old going to do when it comes to AI. They have 10 years. Think about that. They have a decade before they're going to be moving on into college and even really developing the career that they're going to have of the future. So in that decade, where is generative AI going to go? Do we think that it will change? Do we think that it'll improve? Do we think that it'll get more regulated? There's a decade between now and when an 8-year-old of today, which is probably like a third grader or fourth grader, right? When those second, third, fourth graders are going into college a decade from now, these are the types of things they're going to be thinking of. And that final note again is that these jobs will be created by 2027 predictively. So that's still a long way before the end of that decade. So when you're thinking about careers in AI, you're probably thinking about how it touches almost any position. So for us today, what I would love to do is thinking about creating your own small business, because a lot of us out there are small business owners. And if you aren't a small business owner and you're working for a large company, you're probably touching on some of the processes that are part of a business in general, which that could be the marketing of the business, that could be the branding and design, that could be the pricing structures, and that could be how the business is managed. It could be the front of house if you have a physical shop where you have actual products that you're selling. It could be a remote job where you're providing services to other people. But all of those jobs, whether you're working for a large company, you're working for yourself, or you're working with a small team, all will be touched by generative AI. So let's get into some examples of what companies and what kind of things people are working with in generative AI. So this on the right side here, there is a market map that just shows a broad labeling of some of the different companies that are currently using generative AI. This is currently. So if you think about it and extrapolate outwards, you can imagine where some of these other companies could go. So in the text side of this, you've got things like ChatGPT for writing business docs, for writing fiction and nonfiction stories, marketing copy, podcast scripts. You've got for image generation, you've got open source solutions like Stable Diffusion or non-open source solutions like Adobe Firefly to create text to images in art styles that are novel or well known. You've also got the options for training on your own data, including your own art to create models. All of these things are inside of the image world. When it comes to voice and music, there are companies like 11 Labs, which is on the forefront of voice cloning and of the ability to create nuanced voices that sound like very human realistic. Or Draft to create soundscapes, full songs, and simulated voices. Another one that I'll mention here is called Suno, Suno. In Suno, and they've just released their version 3, you can make full songs just through prompting. So those songs can have your own original lyrics in it. You can generate lyrics for the song. You can have instrumentals of the songs. And if you are on a paid plan, those Suno gives you commercial rights to the songs that you're creating. So you can imagine where that is going to go in the near future. And finally, video. And for me as a creative, this is where my heart's at. I was a television producer for a very long time. I would have never guessed how far that this technology has come in such a short time. And even in the last 2 days, I have one more thing to add that didn't even make it into the slide deck because it's so new. But people have been creating through Stable Diffusion was one of the original processes, creating a model that creates a text to video ability where you can actually prompt say an image of a rabbit hopping through a field, and then you can actually generate an image, whether realistic or artistic, of a rabbit running through a field. Some of the forefront leaders in that field are Runway ML, which I love. I live inside of Runway ML. I work with it all the time for creativity. Pika Labs, which is a very small team. It's a female co-founded venture that started off with maybe 5 employees. I think they still have less than 30 employees right now. Pico Labs is doing absolutely next gen things. And then, of course, one I haven't mentioned on here is what Adobe is doing. Adobe has a Firefly for video model that'll come out. But just a couple days ago, Adobe announced that inside of Adobe Premiere, which, if you don't know what Adobe Premiere is, think of Adobe Photoshop for photos. Adobe Premiere is a video editing software that is thought of almost ubiquitously as the standard for editing in the film and TV industry. You've also got Avid and Final Cut and some other proprietary ones, but Adobe Premiere is thought of as one of the best, right beside of DaVinci and other video sources. What they just announced just a couple of days ago is instead of trying to necessarily compete or try to feature rich their product versus something like Runway or Pika, they're just integrating it right in. So you'll go into your Premiere and you'll be like, oh, I want to generate video. And you can do a little drop down that says, do I want to use Runway to generate it? Do I want to use Pika Labs? Do I want to use OpenAI's Sora model? And it basically allows a third party integration into that model. And if you think about just extrapolating outwards, most of the companies that are on this list, especially including Zapier, I'm looking at down here, looking at Replit, I'm looking at you, Google Duet, I'm looking at you, Jasper and Copy, I'm looking at DeepScribe. A lot of these companies have got onto this idea, and Canva is a really good example. A lot of these companies have got onto this idea, and it's a very smart idea, in my opinion, that instead of trying to compete with other competitor companies, they're going to use third-party integrations and just bring it all together. So we don't have to crush the other AI companies. We can actually work together in a unified way that will create a unified workflow across generative AI. And of course, you can imagine over at the LF, this is something that we celebrate because we want transparency, we want there to be standards, and we want people to basically not have to use completely different systems when they want to use generative AI. So this is something that's very exciting. Um, I was going to show a slide that shows more of the open source side of generative AI as well, but just for this one, we're going to skip that, and I'm going to give you information at the end that will lead you on your journey towards learning more about the open source side. So real quick, there's a few more examples of where you could go with AI art and what AI art is before I get into how the generative side works. Is just some examples of some early generative AI from DALL-E 2, from Stable Diffusion, from Adobe Firefly 1, illustrating some examples of some things that you could create. And the reason I wanted to show art specifically during this portion is because I think it's a really good way to visualize what happens when a generative model creates something. It's remember what we talked about in the beginning. It looks at a lot of data, and then when you ask for something from that data, it uses what's called a diffusion model and that noise that we mentioned before to create an original image. So some of the examples I have here are an iterative design for laying out a shoe design, creating your own Saturday morning cartoons, characters, laying out the design work for a piece of jewelry, interior design, or just a basic graphic, representation to show an image. That specific image in the upper left that shows the young lady wearing the VR headset came from another talk that I did at the Museum of Design Atlanta, where we were talking about the future of generative design. And we had the people in the workshop put together a prompt based on different things they called out. And this was the final image that they produced as a group. So some other things that you could do, beverages, album covers, you can work through film and TV, you can work on storytelling, and you can just do idea exploration. One of the coolest things about generative AI is just the idea of exploring something in a way that you can get right to the meat of it and you can actually try it, because all of us probably have ideas, but being able to actually execute those ideas, or at least get something down that takes you from nothing to something, is one of the biggest things that is really helpful with generative AI. So I'm just going to very, very quickly tell you again, a little deeper part about in the generative AI field, what exactly is the art side of this. And this is the exact same way that data is modeled, which is why I like to show art as the example. So ELI5, which is short for explain it to me like I'm five. Artificial intelligence based artwork, which is very similar to the way that inference models work for text and for video, is when a computer program generates images, video, or text based on patterns that it learned from a large collection of data. I'll let you read the how. I'll definitely make this available to everyone who attended. But basically, they look at a whole bunch of red cups and think of it like this. You have two different AIs that are involved. You've got the AI student and you've got the AI teacher. So the AI student is shown a bunch of pictures of red cups, and then it's tested, is this a picture of a red cup or not, by the teacher AI. The AI models, and they each have a little bit different things under the hood, right? All of the student AIs that get it right and are able to identify the red cup are essentially upgraded and sent to the next level. If they're fifth graders, they become sixth graders, let's say. And then those models are all in the sixth grade class. And then all of the students' AIs in the next class are able to identify a red cup. And so over time of continuing to reinforce that training, either through a teacher AI or by humans looking and checking the work manually, over time it's able to recognize what a picture of a red cup is. Then in the middle part there on my graphic where it says draw a red cup, you see how it's blurry? That's the visual example of that noise or diffusion that we talked about. They diffuse the data literally in this way, make it blurry essentially until it is just data. And then the computer is able to also recognize its training data through that diffusion. And then finally, when you ask for a picture of a red cup, it's able to make a picture of a red cup. So that is basically the overview of how AI, not only art, but the way that patterning works on the backside for most inference models. There's some, lots of use cases that go outside of that. There's lots of revolutionary things going on that do it differently, but this is a good way to get started to understand it. Okay, that's enough about training, texting, talking over. I think we should get into the demonstration. So today we're going to go into real life examples of how you can use generative AI in your work in your personal life. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to create a boba tea shop. We're going to create a business model for that boba tea shop. We're going to create some branded assets and some visuals. And the tools that we're going to use to do that are Google Gemini to create slide decks via prompting, I'm going to show you Grok Chat, which is an open source alternative to ChatGPT, but I'm probably going to stay focused on ChatGPT because it's something that is very easily accessible to you. Since we've started working on this webinar, they've opened it up so that you can use ChatGPT without even having to log in. So that'll be worth demonstrating. And then finally, I'm going to show you Adobe Firefly and Stable Diffusion for how to create some branded assets around your product. Now, one thing that I want to mention before we move on about Adobe Firefly, and one of the reasons that even though it's not an open source product that I like to talk about it, was because Adobe is meant for professionals. It's meant for professional graphic designers, video producers, people who work. If you've ever used a PDF document, Adobe Acrobat, is probably something you've used a lot. And so many other products inside of Adobe. Adobe feels that the landscape of ethical AI is very fraught with a bunch of models being trained off scraped data from the internet. Adobe Firefly is attempting to make an ethical AI by only training their AI on their own owned assets. So the Adobe Firefly image model is only trained on the Adobe stock library, which is a huge library of photos and graphics that they've amassed over many, many decades. It's got millions of images in it, and those images have been licensed to Adobe to use. They use public domain images, images that are no longer in copyright, and then items that have been properly licensed through Adobe. So their idea is to try to train a ethical AI. So before we move on, I just want to see, Carly, do we have any questions or anything that lead up to this point, or should I keep going?
You can keep going.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to just run through real quick just the overview of the tools, and then I'm going to go over and actually show you the examples of the tools being used to create our boba tea shop. So what is going on with Google Gemini / Google Slides? If you've ever created a slide deck, you know that laying out the slides, getting the information in there in a format is something that's not only time consuming, but it can be like that brain block. Like, where do I get started? What do I do first? What is really cool is Google Gemini, which is the Google model that's inside of, the model that's inside of Google and is most likely publicly accessible to you right now inside of your Google Docs, is their use case generator for Google Docs. Now, if you look at my slide here in the upper right corner, if you see that blue circle that has a star inside of it, that is a button that opens up the Gemini dialog inside of Google Docs, including Google Slides, Google Docs, Google Sheets. Most Google products have that. If you don't currently have access to that inside of your Google Docs, then go to labs.google. Labs.google. I'm pretty sure that's the whole thing. I think it's labs.google. I don't even think it's .com. I think it's just labs.google. If you go to that, then you can access it by, you can turn on the labs feature. But I've been in it so long, I can't tell you for sure if you have to turn it on anymore. It may just be native to everyone's input. But if it's not, you can go to labs.google and you can turn on the Gemini use cases. So you can see in my image here, on the right side, there is a Gemini dialog box that allows you to ask questions of your slides, create slides, and then insert those slides into the actual Google Docs. So in this particular example, I said, create a slide, introduction to Impressionist art. So then its response there was slide created and inserted. And now I said, create a new slide, a list of well-known Impressionist artists. And then you can see where it's generating the not only an image, that image is not a classic piece of Impressionist art. I believe that image is a brand new piece that was generated just for this. And you can see the list of Impressionist artists on the side there. So basic idea. We'll get more into how we use it with the boba shop in just a second. Grok Chat is the open source version of ChatGPT. It is built on top of Grok, which is a super fast AI chip developer, one of the fastest in the industry. And the reason that we're just talking about that is because its use case is very similar to ChatGPT, but this one is based on open source technology, which we love at Linux Foundation because we are an open source organization. What's cool about Grok, just the same as ChatGPT as well, is you can use it through a web interface, or you can use what's called an API or an application protocol interface that allows you to build your own application inside of your own software and use the capabilities of something like ChatGPT or Grok Chat inside of your own business. And when I show you the actual example, I'll actually use ChatGPT because people are more familiar with that. Here's a quick overview of what it looks like inside of Grok Chat. You go to grok.com, you log in, you select which model that you would like to use. And if you look in the center of the screen towards the top on the slide there where it says model, it says Llama 2 70B 4096. That is an open source model called Llama that was created by Meta or Facebook that that is internal to this product. If you hit the model list, you can choose Minstrel or a different program, and those are all open source foundational models. But don't worry about that. We're going to use the easy version with ChatGPT here. Basically, it works otherwise the same way. You'll enter the prompt that you want, and then you'll go into and it'll respond. The other thing that I will say before we get into the chat is that it's very important when you use these chats that you give it a very formatted, initial prompt so that it gives you the best information back. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means when I show you the example. Finally, we'll talk about images and image creation. Adobe Firefly is the advanced AI model that's trained on all Adobe's owned IP, such as Adobe stock and public domain imagery. Stable Diffusion is Stability AI's open source AI model. Both are highly capable of creating advanced imagery via text prompts, so text to image. And I have to keep in mind that when I say text to image, I know what that is. I've been working on it for a long time. But if this is new to you, text to image is the idea of typing in a prompt like a cute pink bunny holding a boba tea and it using all that data we talked about to create a novel and brand new image of a cute bunny holding a boba tea. And that's something that we'll illustrate again here in our boba tea example. And here's just a quick example of some of the things that you can do with Stable Diffusion and with Adobe Firefly. The Stable Diffusion XL model is their newer model that's much more capable than some of the past models, such as like 1.5 or 2 or 2.5 and 3 or 2.5. And so it is the one that's able to create more accurate imagery. If you've ever seen AI images and went, I don't know that that image looks great. I think that there's some problems with it. Well, that was probably Adobe, that was probably Stable Diffusion 1.5. When you got to Stable Diffusion 2, a lot of those images have become more clear, more clean, more well trained off the data. And if you still are worried that it's not going to be able to produce accurate images, just hold your breath for maybe a week and it's going to improve. Think about it and don't even look at it for another 2 months and then come back. And the data scientists, the humanities people, the artists, all of the people involved with these image generation tools and companies, I believe me when I say they are constantly working on addressing the needs of the people creating imagery. Now, on the right side, here are some of the use cases that are currently available for Adobe Firefly, and there's some really good ones. And this is also something you could log into just using your email address and get some free credits, and you can just play with it. If you go to firefly.adobe.com, you can do text to image, and text to image, of course, is the ability to generate a detailed image from a description. You can do what's called generative fill, where on the example here, you would like paint over his sweater and then say, I want it to be a multicolored sweater instead. And then it will use not only text to image, but it'll use patterning inside of something similar to what's called ControlNet to decide where the edges are at and generate a new sweater. One of my favorite use cases is the text effects. The ability to put in a prompt and then put in some words and be able to create an effect on top of a font that is accurately applied based on the type of prompt you added. So in the example here, they probably put rainbow colored fur and then they asked for the letters A and G. And that is one of my favorite chef's kiss Adobe things that a lot of other products and other other text to image people are not fully focused on, but Adobe is, and I've been very impressed by what they do. Real quickly, I'll just mention generative recolor, text to template, and text to vector are some more advanced things that you could do as a graphic designer inside of Adobe Firefly. There's also a whole host of integrations that Adobe has done with Premiere and Photoshop and Illustrator and all the other Adobe products, and many more to come that are a little outside of the scope of today, but I just want to mention that they are definitely coming. Okay, at this point, I think we're going to. I'll just show you. Okay, I'll show you one more slide here, and then we're going to jump into me showing you how to build a boba shop, right? So there's just a couple of other examples. The one on the far left is AI4Kids.app. This is the app that I've been working on creating along with the K-12 schools, and it is an app that's meant to be universally accessible, which means people with disabilities can use it to create AI art without having with it being accessible. So if you have, if you're not able to use your hands, if you're not able to use your voice, if you have different things that, make it more difficult to create AI art or to even communicate, our mission over the next, currently and over the next few years is to continue to develop this out so that it's very accessible. And just a couple of examples of different image generators, Dolly 3, a wildcat mascot dunking a basketball, wearing blue and white. It was able to generate those images. And then here's an example from a very popular AI influencer of sorts that really sticks to Midjourney. And he was talking about what's called character consistency. And as a creator and an artist, character consistency is one of those big frontiers of AI art where I want to take a picture of myself and I basically want to insert that picture and keep my features the same and create new imagery based on that original image. In his own example here, he took himself, and it looks like he created a picture where he's on a field, probably winning. And the second one, he's at a party. It looks like he's winning there too. He just wants to win a bunch of things. So it's able to do that. We won't get into these how to use things like character reference in Midjourney, but there's some incredible tutorials with someone like Nick St. Pierre where you can dig further into that. And maybe on a future webinar, if y'all are interested, we can get super wonky and we can talk about all of the different aspects of Midjourney and the ways that you add prompts to, you add reference pieces to the end of your prompts to be able to get specific results. Okay, I am going to unshare now and we're going to get into the demo. So, question, am I still sharing okay? Okay, cool. All right, so let me see if I can hide these other things so I can see. All right, so what I'm going to do is I want to show you what I've built. Let me see if I can make this thing hide. Hide. Okay, cool. I'm going to start back at the top here and I'm going to show you what we're going to work on today. So I have created this Boba Bliss mock-up of a boba tea shop idea. I went ahead because of, who knows with internet connections, how fast things or how well things will generate. So I went ahead and generated through the different pieces, and we're just going to walk through what I did. Now, when we get into Q&A, if you have some questions or you'd like to see something, I will attempt to do something live as well. So what I did here is I started off over in ChatGPT, and I did the very most important part. I created that initial prompt based on what it is I was trying to do. So as a person who's worked with these models for quite a while, I can tell you there are three main things that you want to do when you go into something like a chat GPT and you prompt it to give you a response. You need to have a now it's escaping me. Um, um, you need to have a role. You need to give the AI a role. You need to give it a task, and you need to give it an objective. So in this case, I said you, and I'm talking to the language model, you are a branding and business model expert. That's the role. So then you need to give it a task, or sorry, an objective. I am creating a boba tea shop here in Atlanta, Georgia, and then you need to give it, a task, objective, and a role, a task, and an objective. Sorry. So the role, and we have the objective. And so here's the task. Help me create assets based on my needs below. And so here are the three things I asked it to help me do: to describe our boba tea shop's brand identity and values, to suggest some catchy taglines for our boba bliss shop, and to ask what sets our boba shop apart from competitors. So I'm just going to go through and look at how it responded to this first one. It gave us our brand identity. Boba Bliss embodies a fusion of traditional and innovation, reflecting the vibrant and diverse culture of Atlanta. Our brand identity is characterized by modern aesthetics, intertwined with touchy a touch of the whimsy, creating a welcoming and Instagram-worthy space for boba enthusiasts and newcomers alike. And so I won't read through every bit of this, but you can see that we identify the values. We talked about some catchy taglines, such as sip, smile, repeat, indulge in boba bliss, and stirring up happiness one boba at a time. I liked stirring up happiness one boba at a time, and we'll come back to how I use that. So here's some points of differentiation. So then I decided, since I'm making a whole business and something I already know about is what's called a business model canvas. So what I started asking about is to help me create who the customer is and how the business will be formed. So for me, I already know this, but I wanted to work on what a ideal customer avatar would be. I just speculated based on some knowledge I have about this particular brand that it'll be 60% women from 18 to 45 and 40% men of the same age in Atlanta, Georgia. So who's my ideal customer? What are their demographics and psychographics? What are the main points and needs of our customers? And what's the total addressable market? Now, if you don't know to ask these questions, you can ask it as well. Hey, what are some things that I should be thinking about to create my customer avatar? And guess how I got these four? I asked it in a different chat. What are the four things I should be asking it for? So then it breaks down that exact customer avatar. Ideal customer is a young adult living in Atlanta, Georgia, who is socially active, culturally aware, and values experiences over possessions. They may likely be a student or young professional or a creative who enjoys the city's vibrant food scene and seeking out Instagram-worthy experiences. So we talked about the demographics. We talk about the psychographics, including the fact that people love to post about these things on Instagram and TikTok. We talked about the main points of need, including convenience, authenticity, social connection, and then we talked about the total addressable market. Now, the total addressable market, as you can imagine, since I'm using 3.5, which is the one that's publicly accessible to you, it doesn't have the exact data I might need. So then in this particular example, I will go out and I will Google some things that I need, or I can ask a different model, one that has information, or I can use something like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce to find out a demographic. I can add that information in here, and I can get a more tailored result. So, but moving on for now, we decided to work on our business model canvas. And so I'm just going to really quickly frame what a business model canvas is because I want to try to get through this in the next like 5 minutes so we can get to questions. But a business model canvas usually has 7 parts: key partners, key activities, key resources, your value position, your customer relationships, the channels in which that you communicate with your audience, the customer segments themselves, the cost structure for your business, and how you make money through your revenue streams. So this is basically a layout of that exact business model canvas. You know, what we do, how we do it, and I'll show you why I had that layout, how I laid that out once I had the information in just a second. And finally, I played with this idea of making a menu. So, okay, so I've got all this information. This information is just known to me. It's just in my hands. What am I going to do with it? Okay, so I go over to my slide deck here. And the first thing I did with the slide deck is I asked it to help me lay out the structure of the slide deck. So I said here in the Gemini side, and you can see my button over here, the blue button, hey, create a title slide for my boba tea shop founder, JL. So slide created, inserted. Here's that slide. Create an image of a boba tea mascot titled Bliss that's a pink rabbit. So here are the images it created. And on the slide, I had it inserted. So y'all can just think to yourselves, but I think this did a phenomenal job, and I so want to hang out with one of these pink bunnies. Since it is generating the imagery, it's not using any character consistency or anything. It's giving us different ideas. But what we could do is we could settle on an idea that we like, and we can move forward with that idea. So here's some ideas around our Boba Pink plushie. This is the kind of pitch deck that you would show to someone who would fund your business, before you get started. So then beyond that, I asked it, hey, thanks, can you create a slide for my business model canvas? And I inserted the business model canvas in here. So I'll tell you this, when I first got the slide back, it basically shoved it all into one slide, and it was this slide, and it was just too much information. So I massaged it a little bit and I broke it into multiple slides. So, but you can see here what I've done is I've taken the key activities, key partners, the information that I generated from over here on ChatGPT, and I put the information in here. It also, the Google slide generated this image here of the boba tea. So then I laid out my exact business model. So basically, this has got me up to a point where I'm almost ready to pitch my boba tea shop to somebody. But what I really want to do is I want to show as much as I tell what I'm trying to work on. So let's go over into Adobe Firefly and let's talk a little bit more about me visualizing what my shop will look like. Now, for this one, I used a very simple prompt inside of Adobe Firefly: interior of a boba tea shop, cute and modern. We could get into much more details if we want. We can also decide whether or not we like or dislike some of these images, but I got the initial images that I wanted for this demo, so I just stuck with the ones I have here. What we can do is we can add some more stuff here, especially in the Q&A if you have any questions. So I looked through these images, and I would encourage you to think of these image generations as a palette, not as what they call a zero shot, where you hit the button one time and you're like, oh, we got it right. Oh, we got it wrong. Think of it as the starting point, because you can go in and you can use all of these great tools on the side here. You can also go into the tools inside of here and you can decide to change things. You can modify the images you see. You can add and subtract. But for me, I really liked some of these images, especially this one and this one. So I just downloaded them straight up and I inserted them in to my slide deck here. And so it'll be surprising to you how quickly people can really get into your ideas and really like understand what you're working on if you can give them a visual, if they can visualize what it is that you're working on. So I just want to like encourage you to play with that. And one other experiment I did over here with Adobe Express is this idea of making some graphics to go along with my shop. Now, is this the perfect graphic? Maybe not. I just threw it together for this. But what I did do is I used boba and I created a text effect. I asked it to also look like boba tea. And then I created the word boba that looks like boba tea. And then for bliss, I did a similar thing, but with the text effect, I asked for gemstone stickers to look like stickers of gemstones. And then for the image here, I asked it to generate a picture of a boba tea. And then for this image back here in the background, I played with this idea of having a shop. I thought it was a little too busy at this top part, so just for now, I just pulled it down here. But you can see inside of Adobe Express how quickly you could work through these images and everything, right? So before I finish out showing the demo, I do just wanted to mention, the Grok chat. You can go in here. You're like you're a boba tea expert. Make a menu for boba tea shop or a boba tea shop. Now, since this is using Grok and it's using their extra fast processors, this worked really fast. And so here's a good place to get started. This, I believe, will probably get you 70, 80% of the way towards what you're starting. And then it's up to you, of course, and your originality, your personal lived experience to flesh this out. I also just briefly mentioned, of course, the text to image generation through stability. You can build this out the way that you want. It's the much more technical side of it, but we're really not going to worry about that. So that is the basic overview of using these tools. At this point, I'm just going to pause and see if Carly, since we're already running up to 50 minutes, if there's any questions or any kind of feedback, maybe we could go ahead and talk about that a bit.
There's nothing in the chat right now, specifically. I love how you're blending all of these different tools to create. I love it. Awesome.
Yeah. Cool. Well, then I'm going to go ahead and mention where we're heading next in our presentation here. Let's see. Slideshow. So in just a second, I'll go ahead and flash the QR codes to make sure we don't get right up against the edge, and then we'll come back to this slide and talk about the AMA. And just for your information, as an artist, I've been working on generating the life cycle of a tomato, which is a film about the life cycle of a tomato that was grown in China and then exported to Egypt and eventually ends up on Mars. But I just wanted to throw this out there because all four of the images here, as you know, which are part of my project I'm working on, are fully generative images. None of these images come from stock photography. None of them come from compiling different sources together. They're all purely generative imagery. Okay. So I do want to encourage everyone to sign up for more information about the Generative AI Commons. This form will lead you over to the sign up to get into Generative AI Commons to sign up and learn more about our meetings. Forgive the long URL on the side, but what we'll do is we can share some information, either in the chat or post wrap up with some of these same links. And then the Generative AI Commons website itself, this is just a QR code that leads to the actual website. But this one, will lead you to the Generative AI Commons website where you can learn more about what it is we're doing. Finally, I definitely wanted to mention the resources that we've talked about today. First off, there's the Linux Foundation Generative AI Commons website. There's the Adobe Firefly website. There's my app, AI4Kids.app. There's Stability AI for using open source AI models. There's Invoke, which is another way to use open source models. There's Grok, which is the AI chip builder that's super fast, that also has a chat interface. And then there's Hugging Face, which we really didn't get into today, that is a place where people host their models, and a lot of the early experimenters have been working with. So you can go over there, and especially if you have any sort of computer science background, you can really play with a lot of the different concepts that we're talking about. And then finally, some of the ones we were using, Google Gemini and Google being inside of all your Google Docs products, incredibly useful. Just watch it change. Yeah, by the time when we first speculated on this webinar, they were still calling it Google Bard. It's moved to Gemini now, and who knows where it'll be in the future as it gets more and more advanced. So you can start there and just look up, Google Gemini or Google AI, and you'll find your way towards these use cases. And then, of course, most people have heard of OpenAI's ChatGPT, but in November of 2022, when they released 3.5 to everybody, and everybody started really jumping on and understanding how to use generative AI, we will always acknowledge that this is where it kind of started, was with this current boom of AI, was with OpenAI's product. Not to be said that, of course, people have been working on generative AI for 50 plus years. And then finally, I just wanted to mention Midjourney. Midjourney is a very advanced AI art platform. It's got a very small team again, but they are producing some of the highest quality of AI text to imagery at this time. So with that, I'm going to head back to the AMA and see if we have any final questions or thoughts, or if there's anything else that anybody else would like to see or talk about. Sure. I'm going to try to get our...
There is interest, Jeremiah, on where one can order a Boba Bliss.
Oh yeah, you got Boba Bliss. Head to Atlanta. I actually there's a very strong boba culture here in Atlanta. Not nearly what's going on in like San Jose or anything yet, but here in Atlanta we love our boba, and we love. I personally love a good taro boba with some rainbow jelly inside with the popping bubbles. Um, and I also love like cool and cute things, like very kawaii kind of looks of things. So I mean, boba's all the way up my alley. It's my fave. And when we do this same generative AI Commons intro a year from now, which we will do, we'll definitely do another intro, because just like y'all may be starting your journey, or you may be into your journey a year from now, other people will be starting their journey. I hope to be able to go all the way into making a video for you from scratch. And that'll be the dream of next year, is to be able to show you a full-fledged trailer for this boba shop.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, if
Well,
there
I'm gonna...
are any
Yeah, go ahead.
questions, feel free to place in the chat, and if not, we can wrap up here.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you so much again to the LF Generative AI Commons, and to you, Carly and Jen, for just working with me, making sure that all the logistics were in place. Being able to have a very smooth operation like this is really amazing for a group that is, essentially volunteer based. We're all doing this because we love it, because we love being involved. And I'd also encourage everyone, if you're LinkedIn fans, go and check out LinkedIn and go to the LF AI and data page where this is centered at, and follow us. We've got lots of other great webinars, especially if you are on the tech side. We would love to encourage you to go check out some of the panels we're doing with our experts, and then we'll have the model openness framework, which is another very, very techie side thing, where we're making sure that we have a framework built to make sure that that models are ethically trained, or to understand if they are ethically trained. So we can go over there and get as wonky as you want. And if you have any questions for me, especially if you just want to talk art, if you want to talk about what the educational side of this looks like, or if you just want more information about what we're working on, feel free to hit me up over on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jeremiah. Excellent presentation. And thank you everyone that attended today for demystifying generative AI. We explored Gen AI, went through some practical examples and how we can use it in our work and personal life. If there are no other questions, we wish you a wonderful rest of your week and hope to see you at future events. Thank you.